How many times have you heard, it's the thought that counts? So I've been thinking about this saying a lot because I can't decide if it's one of the most beautiful things we tell each other or if it's one of the most destructive. And I think the honest answer is that it's both, in that the line between which one it is depends on how you're using it. Because I think most people use it the wrong way. Let me start with what I think the saying is actually trying to do. Because I don't think it's stupid. I don't think the people who came up with it were wrong, because there is something real in it. What it's pointing at is this idea that the intention behind something matters, that caring matters, that the energy someone put into something, even if the execution fell flat, even if the gift was the wrong size, even if the timing was off, even if the whole thing kind of didn't land the way that they hoped, there's still something meaningful in the fact that they were thinking about you, that they wanted to do something, that you were in their head. And that is real. That genuinely is something. Like, I've received things before and I've given things before that, weren't what I would have picked or weren't as great as I imagined them to be. And if these things were rooted in thought, though, it kind of didn't matter how bad the gift was, if that makes sense. It's more so the idea that they remembered something I mentioned months ago, or they noticed something, or they thought about the gift, because if they didn't think so hard about it, they wouldn't have even came up with that idea. And it didn't matter what the actual object costed or if it was even useful. What landed was the proof that they were paying attention to who I actually am. So that's the thought that counts, right? That specific version of it, where the thought is real, where it's evidence of genuine attention and genuine care, and it counts. And it counts a lot. But that's not how I think most people use the phrase. I think most people use it as an exit ramp. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because I think the more common use, the one that happens constantly, the one I've been guilty of myself, the one you've probably been guilty of too, is using it as a way to let yourself off the hook for not actually doing the thing. And it sounds like this: I thought about calling. I meant to show up. I was going to do that for you. I just, life got in the way, but it's the thought that counts, right? And the other person goes, or you go, yeah, of course, totally, no worries. And everybody then moves on and nothing gets said. And the real feeling, which is probably some version of, I actually kind of needed you to follow through on that, it just gets folded up and put away somewhere. And that happens over and over again. And those folded up feelings stack up. And one day something falls apart and nobody can quite explain why. And it's like, well, it's because intention without action is not the same as action. It just isn't. They are not interchangeable, and telling yourself they are is a really comfortable way to avoid the discomfort of actually doing the hard thing. I know last video I quoted a philosopher, but I'm about to do it again. Seneca once said that philosophy consists not in words, but in actions. And I think about that a lot in this context, because he's making the same point. The thought, the theory, the intention, the beautiful idea you have about what kind of person you want to be, or what kind of friend you want to be, or what kind of version of yourself you're working towards, none of that actually counts until it shows up somewhere in the world, until it becomes a thing you did. Not a thing you thought about doing, not a thing you told someone you were going to do, a thing you actually did. And I know that sounds like a really obvious point. Of course, you have to do the thing. Yes, actions speak louder than words. We know, we've heard it. But I think the reason people keep needing to hear it is because the pull towards just thinking about things instead of doing them is so much stronger than we admit. Here's the thing about thoughts. They feel good, like genuinely. Thoughts and intentions feel really good. Planning feels good. Imagining feels good. Telling someone what you're going to do feels good. There's actual psychological satisfaction in the intention itself, which is part of why it's such an effective trap, because you get some of the emotional reward without any of the cost. You feel like a caring person, a thoughtful person, a person with good values and good intentions, but you haven't had to do anything yet. You haven't had to show up or spend the money or have the hard conversation or do the uncomfortable thing or rearrange everything or, pick apart time in your schedule to do at least a little bit of the thing. The thought felt like enough, and so you let it be enough. And the person on the other end, the one you were thinking about, they just got nothing, or they got a story about what you were going to do, which, depending on the situation, might actually be worse than nothing. Because now they know that you thought about it and still didn't follow through. And I think that's a harder thing to sit with. I want to be honest about where I've been on both sides of this, because I think it would be cheap to just sit here and talk about it without acknowledging that. There have been many times where I've been the person who told myself the thought was enough, where I did have every intention of doing something and then just didn't. And the reasons were always real. I wasn't lying to myself. I was busy. Something came up. It slipped. You know how it is. And the effect was the same regardless of how legitimate the reason was. Whether it was something far-fetched or it was something that, actually was sensible and something actually got in the way. The person didn't get what I'd been thinking about giving them. And I've also been on the other side, where someone made me a promise, not in a big dramatic way, just in a small daily way that people do, and didn't follow through. And said something like, I was thinking about you though. And I wanted to mean it when I said it's fine. It's the thought that counts. I wanted to genuinely feel that way, but I didn't. Not fully, because I didn't need the thought. There are times where I need the thing. And I think most people have been there too. You don't always say it, but you know the difference between someone thinking about you and someone actually showing up for you. Now here's where I want to flip this a little, because I don't want this to become a lecture about how intentions are worthless and only results matter, because I genuinely think that's wrong too, and I think it misses something important. There's a version of this conversation where the conclusion is, forget the thought, just perform, right? Just make results, just deliver, and that might be where you thought this video was going to go. And that does sound clean and rational and productive, but it also kind of turns every relationship and every interaction into a transaction. And I don't think that's right either. Because I think there are situations, real ones, where the intention genuinely is most of the point, where the effort someone made, even if it didn't come together the way they hoped, genuinely is what matters. Like a kid who works for weeks on something for a parent. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is what went into it. The time, the attention, the fact that they wanted to do something that would matter to this person, that thought, that one thought, it does count, and it counts enormously. Or someone who tried, who genuinely fully tried to show up for you and it just didn't work out. That's different. That's a completely different thing from someone who just had a nice idea and then let it stay a nice idea. The differentiator is the effort. The difference is whether anything actually happened because of the thought, whether it moved something, whether it changed what you did or how you spent your time or what you chose to sacrifice. A thought that costs you nothing is easy to have and it's easy to hold. You can think about calling someone you love every day for a year and never pick up the phone. That's not a thought that counts, though. That's a thought that protected you from having to do the thing while letting you feel like you did. A thought that leads somewhere, a thought that turned into a decision or an action or a sacrifice or a moment where you chose the harder thing because someone else mattered to you, that's the thought that counts. That's what this saying is actually about. And I think the reason this matters beyond just gift giving and small gestures is because it's really about who you think about. It's really about how you think about who you are. Because I think a lot of people carry this image in themselves based almost entirely on their intentions. Like, I'm a good friend, I care about people, I'm someone who would do anything for the people I love. And maybe all of that is true at the level of feeling. But if you zoom out and look at the actual record, the actual pattern of what you've done versus what you intended to do, sometimes there's a pretty serious gap there. And that gap is uncomfortable to look at. So you reach for the saying. It's the thought that counts. I meant it well. I'm a good person at heart. And maybe you are. But the world doesn't run on your heart. The people in your life don't experience your heart. They experience what you do. And I know that sounds harsh, but I think it's something to sit with. So if there's a gap, and again, I say this to myself as much as anyone, maybe it's worth closing it. not perfectly, not all at once, not with some dramatic overhaul of your entire character, just more often choosing to do the thing instead of just thinking about it. The thought genuinely matters, but a thought that never goes anywhere is just a thought. And those thoughts are the ones that we have to do something with. Peace.